Hello, it's me again. So today I wanted to switch. We've been reading a lot of fiction stories, which are, the made up stories and the pretend stories. But today I wanted to read a nonfiction story. And you remember before we had to stop going to school, we had been talking about animals and about insects, and we were learning all about them and what makes an animal an insect or a mammal or a reptile or a fish and a bird. We learned about all different groups of animals. So you could talk with your parents about that. And then you might also recall that just before we left, we had talked about life cycles. And we talked a little bit about how insects start out as eggs, and then the baby insect's called a larva, and then they become a pupa, and then they become an adult. And one other insect that goes through that same cycle is a ladybug. So we're going to read this book called A Ladybug's Life. And this has some really big words in it that we might not be familiar with. So I just wanted to start out with some vocabulary words. It has a lot of vocabulary words in it. We're not going to go over every single one of them because that might be too much all at once. But we can start out with an aphid. An aphid is a really teeny tiny green insect that likes to eat plants, especially roses, and they're really bad for plants. Aphids, if you get aphids on your roses, they will kill your beautiful roses that you worked so hard to grow. But ladybugs are very beneficial because they love to snack on aphids. They find aphids to be delicious. So if you put ladybugs on your roses, they'll eat up all the aphids. And you can actually read a little bit more about that if you read Eric Carle's book, The Very Grouchy Ladybug. That's the one where the ladybug's like, hey, you want to fight? But the ladybugs are on a leaf and they're eating aphids, and then the grouchy ladybug doesn't want to share them. So aphids are little tiny green bugs that are bad for plants but delicious to ladybug. Another word I wanted to talk to you about is a larva. We've already introduced that word at school, but you might have forgot it. A larva is a little baby bug. And you remember that we talked about a fly larva is called a maggot, like those nasty white bugs that crawl on dead things and like poop sometimes, and they're so gross. They're maggots. And you remember a few of you had mentioned that sometimes you see them in your garbage can, that like if a fly gets in your house or gets in your garbage can, they'll lay eggs and they hatch into maggots. Those are fly larvae. And that's happened to my garbage. It happens to, because that's what flies are. Flies start out as maggots. And then the pupa is the second stage of an insect's life. So the maggot or the larva, in the case of a ladybug, the larva doesn't look like a maggot. It looks different. The larva eats, and then it turns into a pupa. And that's actually, with caterpillars, that's when they build the cocoon. That's their pupa phase or stage. And then we know that caterpillars will come out as butterflies, and ladybug larvae go into their pupa stage, and then they come out as grown-up ladybugs or young adult ladybugs. The other vocabulary words are more kinds of animals and insects. They have crane fly, which is like a big mosquito, and mealybug, which is another kind of insect that destroys fruit trees. Praying mantis, which is a really big green bug, and they look like aliens. You might have seen them. They've got those big arms that are like this, and they eat other bugs. I'll show it to you when we get to that page. And it also has a robber fly, which is an insect that hunts flies. So, I'm cool with robber flies if they're going to eat all those nasty maggots and flies. And then a warbler, which is a kind of bird. So this is called A Ladybug's Life, and it's written and illustrated by John Himmelman. So you can look at this. If you have a copy of this book, you could read along with me. All right, A Ladybug's Life, written and illustrated by John Himmelman. In the early spring, a ladybug lays her eggs on a leaf. Soon, a ladybug larva squeezes out of her egg. There she is. See, she almost looks like a bee or a wasp, doesn't she? She doesn't look much like a grown-up ladybug. Look at that. Have you ever seen these kind of little bugs? Did you know that they were baby ladybugs? Good morning, spring. So that must be something that happens in the spring. Spring is beginning now, so you could go outside and you could look for ladybug larvae. The ladybug larva plucks an aphid off of a rose stem. Aphid! There she is eating an aphid. Those are so bad for roses. She grows bigger and bigger each day. Look at her gobbling up those aphids. Thank you, ladybugs, for keeping plants healthy by eating up the aphids. Soon, the ladybug larva changes into a ladybug pupa. There she is. Now she's a pupa. It doesn't look very much like a caterpillar pupa when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly or like the chrysalis. It doesn't look much like that, does it? But now, what's happening? What happened to her while she was in there? What did she change into? Look at that. Then the ladybug pupa changes into a ladybug beetle. Ladybugs are a type of insect called a beetle. Now, if ladybugs are insects, we know that means they have how many legs? Do you remember? Did you remember that they have 6 legs? I hope you did. If you forgot, try to make yourself remember that now. Good morning, summer. The ladybug beetle searches for food. Let's look at this ladybug beetle now that she is a young ladybug. Here she is. Let's see, how many body parts does she have? Remember that insects have sections of their body. They have the head with their antenna and their eyes, the thorax, that's the second, that's where their legs and wings attach to, and then their abdomen. And they have this outer shell. Do you remember what the outer shell was called? Remember, it was an XO. Did you remember? An exoskeleton. Remember that silly picture I drew on our anchor chart? I wrote XO and then I drew a skeleton so you could remember the word. Do you remember? Gosh, I miss you guys a lot. Mealybugs make a good meal. The ladybug climbs to the top of an aster. An aster is a kind of flower. And then flies off through the air. A warbler tries to catch the ladybug beetle. Look at the warbler. Oh no, is she going to eat the ladybug, do you think? I hope not. She gets away, but a robber fly is not as lucky. Oh my goodness. That warbler ate that robber fly. The ladybug beetle lands on a child's swing. What do you think the kid's gonna do? I'm gonna pause here and I'm gonna upload another video of the second half of the book so that our videos will stay 10 minutes long. So I'd like you to tell your parents a little bit about insects. Remember, facts about insects. And then tell them also, what do you think will happen next in our story about the ladybug's life?